the billionaire CEO who thought every woman had a price tag, until his black employee rejected him and changed his life forever. "I have a proposition for you, Isabella," Victor said, his voice smooth as silk as he moved closer to her on the moonlit terrace. "Chief Operations Officer. Double your current salary. Equity options." Isabella's expression remained carefully neutral. "And what exactly would this role entail, beyond the official responsibilities?" "I think we have a connection worth exploring," he replied, his eyes holding hers. "Professionally and perhaps beyond." She set her champagne glass down with deliberate care. "Mr. Carter, I'm going to be very clear. I work for what I earn. I'm not for sale." The words hit him like a physical blow. In his world of billion-dollar deals and luxury penthouses, everything had a price: loyalty, affection, companionship. Yet here stood this woman, rejecting not just his advance but the entire framework through which he viewed the world. As she walked away, Victor Carter, the man who had never been denied anything he truly wanted, found himself wondering for the first time if his entire life had been built on a fundamental misunderstanding of human value. Have you ever witnessed someone with everything: money, power, influence, suddenly realize that the most important things in life can't be bought? This is the story of how one woman's dignity and self-respect shattered a billionaire's worldview and set him on a path to redemption he never saw coming. Hi, my beautiful sisters. Before we jump into today's story, I want to remind you of something powerful. You don't need to prove your worth to anyone. Not a boss, not a partner, not a man who only sees value in what he can control. Your worth was never meant to be negotiated. You are the prize, not the price. To every woman out there working 2 jobs, to every mother doing her best with what she has, and to every single mother holding it all together, don't ever trade your peace or your dignity for anyone's approval. You are stronger than you realize, and more deserving than you've been told. If that message speaks to you, write it in the comments. I am the prize. I know my worth. Let's fill this space with strength and sisterhood. I'm Mr. Harrison, and today I'm sharing the remarkable journey of a man who discovered that true worth isn't measured in dollars and cents, but in character and integrity. If you've ever stood your ground against someone who thought they could buy your principles, give this video a like. And if you believe in the power of personal dignity to change lives, subscribe to Timeless Love Tales for more stories that touch the heart and challenge the mind. Victor Carter stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse office, watching the city lights flicker to life as dusk settled over the skyline. 42 floors below, people scurried like ants, unaware they were being observed by one of the most powerful men in the country. At 45, Victor had built pinnacle technologies from a startup in his garage to a multi-billion-dollar empire that had revolutionized artificial intelligence. The journey had hardened him, stripped away whatever idealism he might once have possessed. His reflection stared back at him from the glass. Tailored Tom Ford suit, precisely trimmed salt and pepper hair, the confident posture of a man accustomed to command. What the reflection couldn't show was the emptiness that had gradually hollowed him from within. The growing sense that accumulating more wealth, more power, more conquests, had stopped filling whatever void he was trying to address. "Mr. Carter?" His assistant's voice came through the intercom. "The new operations manager is here for her orientation meeting." Victor checked his Patek Philippe watch, 6:30 p.m. He'd deliberately scheduled this meeting after hours. New executives usually understood the unspoken message. Pinnacle came first, personal life second. It was the first test of many. "Send her in," he replied, not bothering to turn from the window. The door opened with a soft click. Victor waited a calculated 5 seconds before turning, a power move he'd perfected over years of boardroom battles. But when he finally faced his new hire, the practiced smile froze on his lips. Isabella Johnson stood just inside the doorway, her posture straight and confident. She wore a tailored navy suit that spoke of quality rather than extravagance. Her natural hair styled in an elegant updo that framed features both striking and serene. But it was her eyes that caught him off guard, intelligent, assessing, and utterly unimpressed by the theater of power he'd just performed. "Mr. Carter," she said, her voice rich and measured. "Thank you for making time in your schedule." Victor recovered quickly, crossing the room with his hand extended. "The pleasure is mine, Miss Johnson. Your reputation precedes you." This wasn't entirely untrue. He'd skimmed her file earlier, MBA from Wharton, impressive track record optimizing operations at 2 mid-sized tech firms, glowing recommendations. What the file hadn't conveyed was her presence, the quiet dignity that seemed to radiate from her. "Please, sit." He gestured toward the seating area by the windows, where Manhattan sprawled beneath them like a glittering chessboard. "Would you like a drink? The Macallan 25 is exceptional." "Just water, thank you," Isabella replied, taking a seat with the same composed confidence she'd entered with. "I prefer to keep a clear head when discussing business." Something about her refusal, polite but firm, intrigued him. Most people eagerly accepted whatever he offered, whether it was alcohol, opportunities, or flattery. They wanted to be in his good graces, to feel special by proximity to his wealth and power. Isabella Johnson seemed immune to this particular gravity. The meeting proceeded professionally enough. Victor outlined his expectations for the operations department, the challenges Pinnacle faced with scaling their newest AI platform, and the aggressive timeline he envisioned. Isabella asked incisive questions that revealed she'd done extensive research on the company's structure and products. She took minimal notes, maintaining eye contact in a way that suggested she was cataloging not just his words but his character. "Your resume is impressive," Victor said as the formal portion of their meeting concluded. "But I'm curious, why Pinnacle? You could have gone to any number of established tech giants with less demanding cultures." Isabella considered him for a moment before answering. "Because Pinnacle is doing the most innovative work in ethical AI applications. And because I believe your operations infrastructure needs significant improvement to match your technological vision." Victor raised an eyebrow. Most new hires didn't point out company weaknesses in their first meeting with the CEO. "That's refreshingly direct. I was hired to solve problems, Mr. Carter, not to pretend they don't exist." Her smile was professional but carried a warmth that didn't quite reach her eyes. "If you wanted someone to simply agree with everything, you hired the wrong person." A laugh escaped him, genuine, not the calculated chuckle he typically deployed in business settings. "I'm beginning to think I made exactly the right choice, Miss Johnson." As she gathered her things to leave, Victor found himself reluctant to end the meeting. "Perhaps we could continue this discussion over dinner? There's an excellent restaurant just downstairs." Isabella paused, her expression shifting subtly. "Thank you for the offer, but I need to relieve my babysitter. Another time, perhaps, with the rest of the executive team." The gentle but unmistakable boundary surprised him. Women didn't say no to Victor Carter, not to dinner, not to anything. His wealth, power, and carefully cultivated charm had always ensured that. Yet Isabella had declined without apology or elaborate excuse, simply stating her priority lay elsewhere. "Of course," he recovered smoothly. "Family commitments are important." "They are the most important," she corrected him quietly, extending her hand. "Thank you for the meeting, Mr. Carter. I look forward to getting started tomorrow." After she left, Victor remained standing in his office, the encounter replaying in his mind. There had been something refreshing about her directness, her apparent immunity to the aura of wealth and power that typically smoothed his path through life. For the first time in longer than he could remember, Victor Carter felt genuinely curious about another person. If you've ever met someone who wasn't impressed by status or wealth, someone who valued substance over style, hit that like button. These rare individuals often change our perspective in ways we never expect. Victor Carter hadn't always been the cold, calculating businessman he'd become. 20 years earlier, he'd been a brilliant but idealistic computer science graduate with a revolutionary idea for making artificial intelligence more intuitive and accessible. He'd worked 18-hour days in a rented garage, surviving on ramen noodles and coffee, driven by the belief that his technology could change the world. His first investor meeting had been a disaster. 5 straight rejections from venture capitalists who couldn't grasp his vision. The 6th, however, had offered him $500,000 for a 40% stake in his fledgling company. Desperate and running out of options, Victor had accepted, not realizing he was making the first of many compromises that would gradually erode his idealism. As Pinnacle Technologies grew, so did the pressure to prioritize profit over purpose. The investors wanted returns, the board demanded growth, and Victor found himself increasingly making decisions based on financial metrics rather than the values that had once driven him. Each compromise made the next one easier, until eventually, the idealistic innovator was replaced by a ruthless CEO who saw the world as a series of transactions. Women had become another commodity in Victor's life. Beautiful, interchangeable companions attracted to his wealth and power. He dated models, actresses, and socialites, showering them with expensive gifts and exotic vacations, but never allowing them close enough to see the emptiness behind his carefully constructed facade. These relationships followed a predictable pattern. Initial fascination, lavish courtship, gradual disillusionment, and eventual replacement. Victor had convinced himself this was simply the natural order of things. Everything and everyone had a price, and once paid, diminishing returns inevitably followed. Over the following weeks, Isabella Johnson proved herself exceptional at her job. She identified inefficiencies in Pinnacle's operations that had been draining millions annually, restructured the supply chain to reduce delays, and implemented a new project management system that increased productivity across departments. The executive team, initially skeptical of an outsider making such sweeping changes, quickly became her advocates. The Johnson method is working, Victor overheard his CTO telling another executive in the hallway. We're seeing a 22% increase in development efficiency since she reorganized the workflow. And have you noticed how people actually seem happier? The other executive replied. My team used to dread the weekly status meetings. Now they're coming prepared with ideas and solutions. Victor found himself creating reasons to interact with her. Operations reviews that could have been handled by lower-level executives. Meetings where her presence wasn't strictly necessary. Casual visits to her department under the guise of checking on various projects. Each encounter left him more intrigued. Isabella was unfailingly professional, brilliant in her assessments, and somehow always just beyond reach. Unlike others in the company, she never laughed too hard at his jokes, never agreed simply to please him, never lingered after meetings seeking his approval. She treated him not as Victor Carter, billionaire CEO, but simply as her employer, deserving of respect but not adulation. It was maddening and magnetic. During one particularly heated executive meeting, Isabella calmly dismantled a proposal that would have outsourced a significant portion of their customer service department. The projected savings don't account for the loss of institutional knowledge or customer satisfaction, she explained, sliding a detailed analysis across the table. Our research shows that customers value speaking with representatives who understand our products intimately. Outsourcing might save us $8 million annually on paper, but the projected revenue loss from decreased customer retention would be nearly double that. Victor studied her as she spoke, noting how the other executives, all men who typically dominated these discussions, were listening with genuine attention. There was no condescension in their expressions, no impatience to interrupt. Isabella commanded respect not through intimidation or hierarchy, but through competence and clarity. What would you propose instead? Victor asked, genuinely curious. A hybrid model, she replied without hesitation. We maintain our core customer service team in-house but augment them with AI-assisted solutions that handle routine inquiries. This preserves the human touch for complex issues while still achieving approximately 65% of the cost savings in the original proposal. The solution was elegant, balanced, and preserved jobs while still addressing the financial concerns. Victor found himself nodding in agreement, impressed not just by her analysis but by her ability to find middle ground where others saw only extremes. Implement it, he decided, and I want weekly metrics on both customer satisfaction and cost savings. As the meeting concluded, Victor noticed something else unusual. Isabella didn't linger to bask in her victory or seek his approval. She simply gathered her materials, exchanged a few words with colleagues about next steps, and moved on to her next task. Her confidence wasn't performative. It was simply part of who she was. Later that afternoon, Victor's assistant delivered Isabella's personnel file to his desk, the complete version this time, not just the executive summary he'd skimmed before. He told himself this was standard due diligence for a high-performing executive, but he knew his interest went beyond professional curiosity. The file revealed details that both surprised him and made perfect sense. Isabella had worked her way through college as a single mother, earning her undergraduate degree in business while raising her son, Marcus. Her MBA from Wharton had been achieved through a combination of scholarships, loans, and night classes. Before joining Pinnacle, She had transformed operations at two struggling tech companies, saving one from bankruptcy and helping the other become attractive enough for acquisition. What the file couldn't capture was what made Isabella different from anyone else in Victor's orbit. Her unwavering sense of self-worth that seemed completely independent of external validation. In a world where he was accustomed to people deriving their value from his approval, Isabella's self-contained dignity was both refreshing and unsettling. At the quarterly executive retreat, Victor finally saw an opportunity. The company had rented an exclusive resort in the Catskills, and after a day of strategy sessions, the evening turned to cocktails and networking. Victor spotted Isabella on the terrace, slightly removed from the group, gazing at the mountains silhouetted against the twilight sky. "Not one for office politics?" he asked, joining her with 2 glasses of champagne. She accepted the glass with a small nod of thanks. "I find it more valuable to observe than to perform." "And what have you observed about Pinnacle so far?" He leaned against the railing, closer than strictly professional but not inappropriately so. "That it's a company of brilliant individuals who sometimes forget the power of true collaboration," she answered thoughtfully. "And that its leadership values results over process, sometimes to its detriment." "You mean me?" Victor said, amused rather than offended. "You set the tone, Mr. Carter." Her gaze was direct, unfiltered by the deference he was accustomed to. "The company reflects your priorities. And what do you think those priorities are?" Isabella took a sip of champagne before answering. "Growth, innovation, excellence. All admirable." She paused. "But sometimes at the expense of sustainability and human connection." The assessment was uncomfortably accurate. Victor found himself wanting to defend his approach but also curious about her perspective. "And what would you prioritize differently?" "I wouldn't presume to tell you how to run your company," she said with a slight smile. "But in my experience, organizations that value people as much as profits tend to achieve both more sustainably." Their conversation continued as the sky darkened and stars emerged. Victor found himself sharing thoughts about business and leadership he rarely voiced, drawn out by Isabella's thoughtful questions and genuine interest. For once, he wasn't performing the role of charismatic CEO. He was simply engaged in a stimulating conversation with an equal mind. "Tell me about your son," Victor said, genuinely interested in this part of her life she clearly valued above all else. Something in Isabella's expression softened. "Marcus is 14. Brilliant, stubborn, kind-hearted. Currently obsessed with robotics and convinced he's going to build the world's first truly sentient AI." She laughed softly. "He reminds me every day why the work we do matters. Not just for profit margins, but for the future we're creating. You've done an impressive job, raising him while building your career." "It hasn't been easy," she acknowledged, "but the challenges have clarified what matters. When you have someone depending on you completely, you learn quickly to distinguish between what's truly important and what's merely urgent." As the evening wound down, Victor made his move. "I have a proposition for you, Isabella." He rarely used first names with employees, but the evening had created a sense of connection that made formality seem artificial. "I'm creating a new position, Chief Operations Officer. The role would report directly to me, with double your current salary and equity options." Isabella's expression remained neutral. "That's quite an opportunity. I think we work well together," Victor continued, moving slightly closer. "I value your perspective, your directness. We could accomplish great things with you in a more central role." Understanding dawned in her eyes, and something in her expression closed. "And what exactly would this role entail, beyond the official responsibilities?" The question hung between them, its implication clear. Victor had made similar offers before to women who caught his interest: promotions, opportunities, financial rewards that came with unspoken expectations. It had always worked. "I think we have a connection worth exploring," he said smoothly, "professionally and perhaps beyond." Isabella set her champagne glass down carefully. "Mr. Carter, I'm going to be very clear. I'm interested in advancing at Pinnacle based solely on my merits and contributions. If you're offering me a promotion because you value my work, I'm honored to be considered. If you're offering it with other expectations, I must decline." Victor felt a flash of irritation, quickly masked. "You misunderstand me." "I don't think I do," she interrupted gently but firmly. I work for what I earn, Mr. Carter. I'm not for sale. The words landed like a physical blow. In his world, everything had a price: loyalty, affection, companionship. He'd never considered it transactional so much as realistic. Yet Isabella stood before him, rejecting not just his advance but the entire framework through which he viewed relationships. I should return to my room, she said into the silence. My son will be calling for our nightly check-in. Thank you for the conversation and the champagne. As she walked away, Victor remained motionless, experiencing an unfamiliar sensation. It wasn't just rejection. He'd faced that in business deals often enough. It was the uncomfortable recognition that for the first time in years, someone had seen through him completely and found him wanting. And strangest of all, instead of dismissing her judgment, he found himself wondering if she might be right. If you've ever had a moment when someone's words cut through all your defenses and made you question everything you thought you knew about yourself, hit that like button. These moments of truth can be painful, but they're often the beginning of profound change. Stay with me as we discover how Isabella's rejection became the catalyst for Victor's transformation. The next morning, Victor avoided the group breakfast, choosing instead to have coffee alone on his private balcony. Isabella's words had kept him awake most of the night, triggering an uncomfortable self-examination he hadn't experienced in years. His initial anger at her rejection had given way to something more complex, a nagging sense that she had seen something fundamental about him that he had been avoiding acknowledging. I work for what I earn, Mr. Carter. I'm not for sale. The simplicity and dignity of her statement haunted him. Had he really become the kind of man who assumed everyone and everything could be bought? When had he crossed that line? The retreat concluded with a final strategy session where Isabella presented her department's quarterly goals. She was professional and focused, giving no indication that anything unusual had transpired between them the previous evening. Victor found himself watching her with new eyes, noting how she credited her team members by name for various initiatives, how she addressed questions directly without defensiveness, how she seemed genuinely invested in the company's mission beyond just financial metrics. On the helicopter ride back to Manhattan, Victor sat alone, staring at the landscape below. For the first time in years, he felt unsettled in a way that couldn't be resolved with money or power. Isabella Johnson had held up a mirror to him, and he wasn't sure he liked what he saw reflected there. Back at Pinnacle headquarters, Victor threw himself into work, trying to push the uncomfortable feelings aside. He maintained a professional distance from Isabella in the weeks that followed, their interactions limited to necessary meetings and email exchanges. If she noticed the change in his behavior, she gave no indication, continuing to excel in her role with the same quiet competence that had first caught his attention. But something had shifted inside him. Victor found himself noticing things he'd previously overlooked: the exhaustion in his executive assistant's eyes after he demanded she work through another weekend, the nervous deference of junior employees who clearly feared his criticism, the transactional nature of nearly every relationship in his life. One evening, working late, he overheard a conversation from the break room near his office. How's Marcus doing with the science project? A woman's voice asked. Diane from accounting, he thought. Getting there, Isabella replied. The regional competition is next weekend, and he's determined to qualify for nationals this year. You'll be there, right? Even with the Singapore client meeting. Absolutely. I've arranged to take the red-eye Friday night after the client dinner. I'll be tired, but I wouldn't miss it. Some things aren't negotiable. Victor paused outside the door, struck by the conviction in her voice. In his world, everything was negotiable for the right price. Yet here was Isabella, willing to endure significant personal discomfort to keep a promise to her son. It wasn't grand or showy, just a quiet commitment to what she valued most. The following week, Victor found himself reviewing employee satisfaction surveys, something he normally delegated to HR. The results were sobering. While Pinnacle offered competitive compensation and prestigious career opportunities, the company scored poorly on work-life balance, management approachability, and sense of purpose beyond profit. The comments painted a picture of a talented workforce that felt more like machinery than a community of innovators. Most troubling were the retention statistics. Pinnacle had a turnover rate nearly double the industry average, with exit interviews citing toxic culture and lack of human connection as primary reasons for departure. The company was hemorrhaging talent and institutional knowledge, all while Victor had been focused solely on quarterly earnings and market capitalization. "Mr. Carter?" His assistant's voice interrupted his thoughts. "There's something you should know. Isabella Johnson's son has been in an accident. She's left for the hospital." Victor looked up sharply. "What happened? Is it serious?" "A school bus collision. I don't have details, but she left in quite a hurry. She asked me to reschedule her meetings for the next few days." Without fully understanding his own impulse, Victor stood. "Cancel my afternoon, and get me the name of the hospital." 40 minutes later, Victor walked into Mount Sinai's emergency department, feeling strangely out of place in his bespoke suit among the worried families in the waiting area. He spotted Isabella immediately, sitting alone, her usual composure replaced by the unmistakable tension of a parent fearing for their child. "Ms. Johnson," he said quietly, approaching her. She looked up, surprise momentarily displacing worry. "Mr. Carter, what are you doing here?" It was a fair question, one he wasn't entirely sure he could answer. "I heard about your son. I wanted to see if there was anything you needed." "That's unexpected." She gestured to the chair beside her. "The doctors are with him now. The initial scans look promising. No internal bleeding, but he has a broken leg and possible concussion." Victor sat, noticing the tremor in her hands that belied her calm recitation of facts. "Have you eaten anything? Can I get you coffee?" A small, tired smile touched her lips. "I'm fine, but thank you." They sat in silence for a moment before Isabella spoke again. Marcus was on his way to a robotics competition. The team had been working for months on their project. "He'll have other competitions," Victor offered. "It's not about the competition." She shook her head slightly. "It's about the work they put in, the collaboration, the problem-solving. He loves that part even more than winning." Victor considered this. "He sounds like his mother." This earned a genuine smile. "In some ways. In others, he's entirely his own person. Stubborn, idealistic, convinced he can change the world." Her expression grew thoughtful. "I hope he never loses that." "Ms. Johnson." A doctor appeared in the doorway. "You can see your son now." Isabella stood quickly. "Thank you for coming, Mr. Carter. It was kind." "Of course." He rose as well. "If there's anything you need, time off, specialists, anything, please don't hesitate to ask." She nodded and followed the doctor, leaving Victor standing alone in the waiting room. He felt strangely out of his element, yet also more authentic than he had in years. He hadn't come with an agenda or expecting anything in return. For once, he had simply responded to another person's difficulty with basic human concern. On his way out, Victor stopped at the billing department. "I'd like to take care of all expenses for Marcus Johnson," he told the administrator, sliding his platinum card across the counter. "And I'd prefer this to remain anonymous." "That's very generous, sir," the woman replied. "But may I ask why you don't want the family to know?" Victor considered the question. "Because some things shouldn't be transactions," he finally said. "They should just be human." As he walked to his waiting car, Victor felt a strange lightness. For the first time in longer than he could remember, he had acted without calculating the return on investment, without considering what he might gain. And somehow it felt more satisfying than any deal he'd ever closed. If you believe that true character is revealed in how we treat others when there's nothing to gain, hit that like button. And if you've ever experienced an unexpected act of kindness that changed your perspective, share your story in the comments below. Over the next few weeks, Victor found himself making subtle but significant changes. He started with small things, learning the names of the maintenance staff who cleaned the offices after hours, asking his executive assistant about her family, actually listening to the answers. He began ending meetings at 5:30 p.m. rather than letting them run into the evening, noticing with surprise how this simple adjustment improved both morale and productivity. In executive sessions, he found himself asking different questions. Instead of focusing solely on how much and how fast, he began asking how sustainable and what impact. He thought more about Isabella's observation that organizations valuing people as much as profits tended to achieve both more sustainably. When the quarterly board meeting approached, Victor prepared a presentation that departed significantly from his usual focus on market dominance and shareholder returns. Instead, he outlined a vision for Pinnacle that balanced profitability with purpose, that measured success not just in financial metrics but in employee retention, innovation, and positive social impact. The data is clear, he told the initially skeptical board members. Companies with engaged workforces and strong ethical foundations outperform their competitors over the long term. We've been burning through talent and goodwill in pursuit of short-term gains, and it's not sustainable. This is quite a shift in philosophy, Victor, remarked Jonathan Winters, the longest-serving board member. What prompted this new direction? Victor paused, considering how much to reveal. Let's just say I've been reminded recently that the most valuable assets in this company aren't our patents or our market share. They're our people and the culture we create. To his surprise, the board approved his proposed changes with minimal resistance. Several members even expressed relief that someone had finally addressed the company's troubling turnover rates and declining innovation metrics. As the meeting concluded, Winters pulled Victor aside. "I've known you since you were pitching your startup from that garage," he said quietly. "This is the first time in years I've seen a glimpse of that original Victor Carter. The one who wanted to change the world, not just conquer it." Victor nodded, feeling a strange mix of embarrassment and pride. "I lost sight of some things along the way. I'm trying to correct course." "Well, whatever or whoever inspired this change, I'm glad for it," Winters said with a knowing look. "The company needs the visionary as much as it needs the executioner." As the weeks passed, Isabella returned to work, thanking Victor formally for his understanding during her son's recovery, but giving no indication she knew about his anonymous payment of the medical bills. Marcus was healing well, already talking about the next robotics competition and working on designs from his hospital bed, then later from home while his leg mended. Victor found himself genuinely curious about the boy's progress, not as a way to get closer to Isabella, but because he remembered his own teenage passion for technology. The pure excitement of creation before business concerns had complicated everything. On impulse, he arranged for Pinnacle's head of robotics research to send Marcus some advanced components and development tools, again anonymously. The changes at Pinnacle began to take root. Victor implemented a more flexible work policy, allowing employees to work remotely 2 days a week. He established a mentorship program pairing senior executives with promising junior staff. Most significantly, he launched a review of compensation structures across the company, addressing inequities that had long been ignored. During this process, he discovered something troubling, a pattern of women and minorities being paid less than their white male counterparts with similar qualifications and responsibilities. Isabella's department was the notable exception, where she had already implemented equitable compensation practices. "I want this fixed immediately," Victor told his CFO, "and I want a complete overhaul of our hiring and promotion practices to ensure this doesn't continue. It's going to impact the bottom line this quarter," the CFO warned. "I'm aware," Victor replied, "but it's the right thing to do and ultimately it's good business. We can't claim to be innovators while perpetuating outdated inequities." 3 months after the night on the terrace, Victor found himself alone in the elevator with Isabella for the first time since their uncomfortable exchange. The silence between them felt weighted with unspoken thoughts. "I hear Marcus is back at school," Victor said finally. "Fully recovered?" Isabella looked surprised at the personal inquiry. "Yes, thank you. He's already preparing for the state robotics championship next month." "That's good to hear." Victor hesitated, then continued. "I've been meaning to speak with you about something. The changes you implemented in operations, the collaborative workflow model, the emphasis on work-life balance. I'd like to expand those principles company-wide." Isabella studied him, her expression thoughtful. "That's a significant shift for Pinnacle." "Yes, it is." The elevator reached the lobby, but neither moved to exit. "I've been doing a lot of thinking about what you said, about organizations that value people as much as profits. I've noticed the changes," she acknowledged. "The equity adjustments, the flexible work policy. People are talking about it. In a good way, I hope?" "Mostly surprise," she said with a small smile, followed by cautious optimism. The doors began to close, and Victor quickly pressed the hold button. "Would you be willing to head a task force on organizational culture? Your perspective would be invaluable." Isabella considered him for a long moment, as if trying to discern his true motivation. Is this a professional request, Mr. Carter? Entirely, he assured her. No hidden agendas. I respect your insight and your integrity. The company would benefit from both. Something in his sincerity must have convinced her. In that case, I'd be happy to contribute. Thank you. He released the door button. And Isabella? I owe you an apology for my behavior at the retreat. It was inappropriate and disrespectful. She nodded, accepting his words without elaboration. As they parted ways in the lobby, Victor felt another piece of his old self falling away. The man who had viewed apologies as weakness, who had never acknowledged being wrong. The task force became the catalyst for deeper organizational change. Isabella assembled a diverse team from across departments and levels, creating a forum where junior staff could speak as freely as executives. Victor attended these meetings not as CEO but as an equal participant, listening more than speaking, learning about aspects of his company he had never truly seen before. One evening, after a particularly productive session, Victor found himself walking with Isabella toward the parking garage. Your son's competition is this weekend, isn't it? He asked. Yes, she replied, surprise evident in her voice. How did you know? I pay attention, he said simply. Then, after a moment's hesitation, would it be inappropriate if I attended? I'm genuinely interested in seeing these young innovators at work. Isabella considered this. Marcus would probably be thrilled to have the CEO of Pinnacle Technologies watching. Just be prepared for a lot of questions. He's curious about everything. I look forward to it, Victor said, meaning it. The Regional Robotics Championship was held in a high school gymnasium transformed by the energy and creativity of dozens of teenage teams. Victor felt strangely nervous as he entered, dressed in casual clothes rather than his usual business attire. He spotted Isabella in the stands and made his way toward her. Mr. Carter? She greeted him, looking both surprised and pleased that he had actually come. This is quite different from your usual Saturday, I imagine. A welcome change, he replied, taking the seat she offered. Where's Marcus's team? Station 14 in the blue shirts. Marcus is the one gesturing dramatically while explaining something to the judges. Victor followed her gaze to a lanky teenager with his mother's confident posture and expressive hands, clearly passionate about whatever he was describing to the attentive judges. He has your presence, Victor observed, and his father's technical mind, Isabella added, a hint of old pain in her voice, though thankfully not his priorities. Victor wanted to ask more but sensed this wasn't the time. Instead, he watched the competition unfold, genuinely impressed by the ingenuity and problem-solving skills displayed by the young competitors. Marcus's team performed exceptionally well, their robot completing complex tasks with precision that would have impressed Pinnacle's engineering department. When they were announced as regional champions, qualifying for the state finals, Victor found himself cheering as enthusiastically as any parent. The pure joy on Marcus's face as he celebrated with his teammates reminded Victor of his own early successes, before money and power had complicated everything. After the awards ceremony, Isabella introduced him to her son. Marcus, this is Mr. Carter, my boss and the CEO of Pinnacle Technologies. Your robot's servo motor response time is incredible, Victor said, extending his hand. How did you manage to reduce the lag in the articulation sequence? Marcus's eyes widened, clearly not expecting such a specific technical question. We wrote custom firmware that prioritizes motion commands and implemented a predictive algorithm that anticipates the next likely movement, he explained eagerly. Do you want to see the code? For the next 20 minutes, Victor found himself deep in conversation with Marcus about robotics, AI, and the future of technology. The boy was brilliant, asking insightful questions that many of Victor's engineers wouldn't have thought to pose. More striking was his enthusiasm, the pure love of creation and problem-solving that Victor himself had once possessed before business concerns overshadowed technical passion. Your son is remarkable, Victor told Isabella as they walked to the parking lot afterward. Pinnacle should start recruiting him now. He has plenty of time to decide his path, Isabella replied with a smile. But thank you for coming today. It meant a lot to him. It meant a lot to me too, Victor said quietly. It's been years since I've been around that kind of uncomplicated passion for technology. It's refreshing. Isabella studied him for a moment. You know, for someone who built one of the most innovative tech companies in the world, you don't often talk about the technology itself anymore. I've been distracted by spreadsheets and market share, Victor admitted. Sometimes I forget what drew me to this field in the first place. Perhaps you should visit the development labs more often, she suggested. Reconnect with the creative side of what we do. As they reached her car, Victor found himself reluctant to end the conversation. Would you and Marcus like to have dinner sometime? Not as a date, he added quickly, seeing her expression. Just as friends, I suppose, if that's not too presumptuous. Isabella considered him for a long moment. You've changed, Victor, she said finally, using his first name for the first time. I'm not entirely sure why or how much, but it's noticeable. I had a good teacher, he replied simply. She smiled at that. Dinner would be nice, as friends. If you've ever witnessed someone's genuine transformation, not just changing their behavior but reconsidering their fundamental values, share your thoughts in the comments. True change is rare and powerful, and it often begins with a single moment of truth that forces us to see ourselves clearly. 2 weeks later, Victor sat across from Isabella and Marcus at a casual Italian restaurant in Brooklyn, far from the exclusive Manhattan establishments where he typically dined. He had suggested the venue after learning it was one of their favorites, wanting them to feel comfortable rather than impressed. So you really started Pinnacle in a garage? Marcus asked, his enthusiasm for technology extending to its history. Like Apple and Microsoft? A rented garage with spotty electricity and no heating, Victor confirmed, smiling at the memory. I slept on a futon next to my servers for the first year. The landlord thought I was crazy. What made you believe in your idea so much? Marcus leaned forward, genuinely curious. Even when no one else did? The question gave Victor pause. It had been years since he'd thought about those early days, about the pure conviction that had driven him before money and power became his metrics for success. I believed AI could be more intuitive, more responsive to human needs, he finally answered. Everyone was focused on making machines think like humans. I wanted to make machines understand humans, our inconsistencies, our emotional responses, our unspoken needs. That's still what makes Pinnacle's AI different, Isabella observed. The empathetic response algorithms. They're what drew me to the company. It was the original vision, Victor acknowledged. Sometimes I wonder how much of that vision we've maintained as we've grown. The conversation flowed easily throughout dinner, ranging from technology to books to Marcus's plans for college. Victor found himself genuinely enjoying their company, not as potential conquests or business assets, but as interesting people whose perspectives he valued. When Marcus excused himself to the restroom, Isabella regarded Victor thoughtfully. This is the most relaxed I've ever seen you, she observed. You're different outside the office. I'm trying to remember who I was before Pinnacle consumed my identity, he admitted. It's not always easy. Why now? She asked directly. What changed? Victor considered deflecting but found himself wanting to offer honesty instead. You challenged something fundamental about how I see the world. When you said you weren't for sale, it made me realize how transactional my life had become. How I'd started to measure everything and everyone in terms of their utility or price. Isabella's expression softened. That must have been uncomfortable to recognize. Extremely, he agreed with a rueful smile. But necessary. I've been thinking a lot about value lately, what things are truly worth versus what they cost. And what have you concluded? That I've been using the wrong metrics for success, both professionally and personally. Marcus returned, and the conversation shifted back to lighter topics. But something had changed between Victor and Isabella. A new understanding, a tentative bridge across their different worlds. As weeks passed, Victor continued implementing changes at Pinnacle. He restructured executive compensation to be less top-heavy, redirecting funds to improve benefits for all employees. He established a foundation focused on increasing diversity in tech, providing scholarships and mentorship for underrepresented groups. Most significantly, he refocused the company's mission on developing AI applications for education, healthcare, and environmental sustainability, returning to his original vision of technology that served human needs. These changes weren't without resistance. Several board members questioned the impact on short-term profits, and some executives accustomed to the old culture left for competitors. But to Victor's surprise, many more embraced the new direction with enthusiasm. Innovation increased, and employee retention improved dramatically. The task force Isabella led became a permanent advisory council, ensuring diverse perspectives informed company decisions. She continued to challenge Victor when necessary, but their relationship evolved into one of mutual respect and genuine friendship. They occasionally had dinner together, sometimes with Marcus, sometimes just the two of them, discussing everything from business strategy to philosophy to their personal journeys. During one such dinner, 6 months after their uncomfortable exchange on the terrace, Victor finally asked the question that had been on his mind. What happened with Marcus's father? If you don't mind my asking. Isabella was quiet for a moment, considering whether to share this part of her life. He was my professor in graduate school, she finally said. Brilliant, charismatic, married. I was young and impressed by his mind, his confidence. When I got pregnant, he made it clear that his career and family couldn't accommodate our mistake. He offered money for an abortion, then later for child support in exchange for my silence. I'm sorry, Victor said quietly, understanding how painful this must have been. Don't be. It taught me early what I value and what I don't. She met his eyes directly. I chose my son and my integrity over security or approval. It was the best decision I ever made, even though it meant working twice as hard for everything afterward. Victor nodded, seeing clearly how this experience had shaped her uncompromising sense of self-worth. Marcus is lucky to have you as his model. I hope so, she said softly. I want him to understand that his value isn't determined by other people's assessments or by what he can acquire. That true worth comes from within. The lesson resonated deeply with Victor, who had spent decades measuring his value through external metrics: wealth, power, conquest. I wish someone had taught me that earlier, he admitted. It's never too late to learn, Isabella replied with a gentle smile. As spring turned to summer, Pinnacle hosted its annual charity gala, traditionally an ostentatious display of the company's success and Victor's status. This year, however, Victor transformed the event into a showcase for the Pinnacle Foundation's new initiative supporting STEM education in underserved communities. The highlight of the evening was the announcement of the Isabella Johnson Scholarship Program, providing full university funding and mentorship for promising students from disadvantaged backgrounds. Victor had planned the initiative for months but had kept it secret from Isabella until the public announcement. When he called her to the stage, her surprise was evident. This program embodies the values that have transformed Pinnacle over the past year, Victor told the assembled guests. Values of integrity, opportunity, and recognizing that true talent and worth exist everywhere, not just in privileged spaces. Later, as the event wound down, Isabella found Victor alone on the terrace, reminiscent of their conversation months earlier that had changed everything. You didn't have to name it after me, she said, joining him at the railing. I wanted to honor the person who helped me rediscover what matters, he replied simply, who reminded me that not everything has a price. Thank you, she said quietly, not just for the scholarship but for listening, for being willing to change. I should be thanking you, Victor countered. You saw something in me worth challenging when it would have been easier to just play along or walk away. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, looking out at the city lights. Victor, Isabella said finally, turning to face him, I've been offered a position as COO at Meridian Systems. The news hit him with unexpected force. That's a significant opportunity. It is, she agreed, but I wanted to discuss it with you before making my decision. Are you unhappy at Pinnacle? He asked, trying to keep his voice neutral despite the sinking feeling in his chest. Not at all. The changes you've implemented have made it a place I'm proud to work. She paused. But this offer would mean advancement, new challenges, and honestly, a substantial increase in compensation that would help with Marcus's college expenses. Victor nodded, understanding her practical considerations. A part of him wanted to immediately counteroffer, to use Pinnacle's resources to keep her. But he recognized that would be falling back into old patterns, trying to buy what he valued rather than respecting its inherent worth. You would be an exceptional COO, he said sincerely. Meridian would be fortunate to have you. Isabella studied him, seeming to search for something in his expression. Is that all you have to say? Victor took a deep breath. Professionally, I would hate to lose you. Pinnacle is better because of your influence. Personally, he hesitated, then continued with honesty. I would miss our conversations, your perspective. Your friendship has become important to me. It's important to me too, she said softly. Whatever you decide, I support you, Victor told her. Your value to me, to Pinnacle, isn't diminished if you choose a path that serves your goals better. Isabella's expression softened into a warm smile. That's exactly what I needed to hear. Have you made your decision? He asked. Not yet, she replied. But I think I'm closer now. As they walked back inside together, Victor realized how profoundly his perspective had changed. 6 months ago, he would have viewed Isabella's potential departure purely as a loss of a valuable asset. Now, he understood that true respect meant supporting her choices, even when they didn't align with his preferences. Whatever she decided, he was grateful for the transformation she had catalyzed in him. From a man who believed everything had a price to one who recognized that the most valuable things in life couldn't be bought, only earned through character, integrity, and genuine human connection. If you believe that true growth often comes through the people who challenge us most, hit that like button. And if this story of transformation resonated with you, subscribe to Timeless Love Tales with Mr. Harrison for more stories that explore how love, in all its forms, can change us for the better. 2 weeks later, Isabella declined the offer from Meridian Systems. When Victor asked her why, she smiled and said simply, because sometimes the most valuable work isn't about the title or the compensation. It's about being somewhere